Montana Territory, 1879. The harsh winter winds howled across the barren landscape like hungry wolves, matching the hollow emptiness in Ruby Zimmerman's chest. At 21 years of age, she stood on the porch of her family's modest homestead, her chestnut hair whipping across her tear-stained face. The isolation of frontier life had never felt more absolute than in this moment. As she watched the last wagon disappear over the horizon, her sister's family fleeing east after the failed harvest and her father's death, Ruby clutched the deed to the farm in her trembling hands. A woman alone can't survive out here, her brother-in-law had warned before departing. Sell the land and come east with us. But something in Ruby refused to surrender the only home she'd ever known, even as reason told her he was right. The Montana Territory devoured the weak and unprepared. It was a place for hardened men, not a slender young woman in a faded blue calico dress. The frontier takes everything you love, Ruby whispered to herself, the bitter lesson her short life had already taught her. Her mother, consumption. Her father, a broken neck from a startled horse. Now her sister, gone to Pittsburgh. Ruby had learned early that attachment in this harsh land led only to heartbreak. Better to stand alone than to watch everyone you care for disappear over the horizon. 3 days later, Ruby was struggling to repair the chicken coop when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart hammered as she grabbed her father's shotgun and stepped cautiously around the corner. A lone rider appeared, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. "State your business," Ruby called out, raising the shotgun to her shoulder. The young man raised both hands slowly. "Finley Adams, ma'am. New ranch hand over at Cottonwood Creek." He couldn't have been more than 24, with sandy blonde hair and clear blue eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners when he spoke. Despite his youth, his hands were calloused, his lean frame suggesting the wiry strength needed for ranch work. "Zimmerman land is private," Ruby replied, not lowering the weapon. "Begging your pardon, but I was riding fence for Mr. Henderson when I spotted smoke coming from here." He gestured toward the small chimney. "Folk around these parts said the Zimmermans had all left. Thought I should check no outlaws were squatting." His gaze moved to the broken coop. "Seems you could use a hand with that repair." "I can manage." Ruby's voice was firm, though the weight of the gun was making her arms tremble. Finley nodded, his expression serious. "A person should be able to fix their own fences. But my pa always said there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered honest." He dismounted slowly. "I'll be on my way if you prefer, Miss Zimmerman. Or I can have that coop fixed in an hour and be gone before supper." Something in his straightforward manner made Ruby lower the shotgun slightly. The broken coop meant losing more chickens to foxes, chickens she desperately needed. "1 hour," she agreed reluctantly, "and then you ride out." Finley's skillful hands made quick work of the repairs, while Ruby watched suspiciously from the porch, shotgun across her lap. As promised, he finished as the sun touched the distant mountains. "Thank you," Ruby said stiffly as he mounted his horse. Finley adjusted his hat. "Henderson's got me checking this section of fence every few days. Would it offend if I stopped by to make sure you're faring all right?" "I don't need looking after, Mr. Adams. Never suggested you did." A slight smile touched his lips. "But winter's coming, and neighbors should check on neighbors." Without waiting for her reply, he touched his hat brim and rode away. 3 days later, a blizzard howled across the plains. Ruby had just finished securing the livestock when she spotted Finley riding through the thickening snow, leading a second horse laden with firewood. "Thought you might need this," he called over the wind, dismounting and beginning to unload the wood. Pride warred with practicality in Ruby's mind. Her own woodpile was dangerously low. "I can't pay you," she said finally. "Not asking payment." Finley stacked the wood neatly against the house. "Just being neighborly." As the winter deepened, Finley's visits became a regular occurrence. He always brought something: firewood, coffee, ammunition, and always found some small repair that needed attention. Ruby's initial suspicion gradually softened. Unlike the men from town who occasionally rode by with thinly veiled offers to buy her land at a fair price, Finley never mentioned the property or suggested she couldn't manage alone. One bitterly cold January evening, as they sat by her fire drinking coffee, Ruby finally asked the question that had been troubling her. "Why do you keep coming back, Mr. Adams?" Finley considered his coffee cup for a long moment. "My first winter out here, I was 17. Got caught in a blizzard. would have died if an old trapper hadn't found me. He looked up at her. He told me something I never forgot. Out here, the only law that matters is that we look out for each other. Is that all? Ruby pressed, suddenly needing to know if there was more. Finley's eyes met hers. No, he admitted quietly. That's not all. The spring thaw brought new challenges. Ruby's meager savings were nearly gone, and the farm needed more work than one person could manage. Pride kept her silent about her struggles when Finley visited, but her thinning frame and tired eyes told their own story. One evening in early April, Ruby returned from town to find Finley and two other ranch hands from Cottonwood Creek plowing her fields. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, jumping down from her wagon. Finley straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Getting your spring planting started. I didn't ask for this." "No, you didn't." His voice was gentle but firm. "Ruby, you're working yourself to death. Let people help you. So I can owe everyone in the county. So they can whisper about poor Ruby Zimmerman who couldn't manage on her own. I've seen how it goes. Help turns to control, then to ownership." Understanding dawned in Finley's eyes. "Is that what you think this is? Me trying to take your land? Isn't it?" Ruby challenged, her voice breaking slightly. "Everyone wants something." Finley dismissed the other men with a nod, waiting until they were out of earshot before speaking. "You're right. I do want something." He stepped closer. "I want to see you succeed here. I want to know you're safe. I want—" He hesitated, then continued more softly. "I want to see you smile again." The simple honesty in his voice cracked something in Ruby's carefully constructed defenses. For the first time since her father's death, she allowed herself to truly weep, the sobs shaking her entire body. And for the first time in years, she allowed someone to hold her while she cried. The summer of 1880 brought new beginnings. With Finley's help on evenings and Sundays, Ruby's farm began to thrive. They fell into an easy rhythm of work and conversation. Ruby found herself watching the horizon each evening, her heart quickening at the sight of his approaching horse. Yet she kept careful boundaries between them, retreating whenever their conversation strayed toward anything more personal than farm work. The lesson of the frontier was etched too deeply in her heart. Attachment meant inevitable loss. One sweltering August afternoon, Finley arrived with news that changed everything. "The Henderson place is for sale," he said as they sat in the shade of Ruby's porch. "Old man Henderson's moving to Denver to live with his daughter." "Who'll buy it?" Ruby asked, not yet understanding the significance. "I'm thinking of making an offer." Finley's eyes held hers. "I've been saving for my own place. It's smaller than Cottonwood Creek, but good grazing land." Ruby's heart stuttered. "You're staying in the territory then?" "That depends." Finley shifted, suddenly appearing younger and more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "Ruby, I need to ask you something." Before he could continue, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. 3 riders appeared, led by a barrel-chested man Ruby recognized as Chester Wilkins, the local land speculator who'd been pressuring her to sell since her father's death. "Miss Zimmerman," Wilkins called out, not bothering to dismount. "I've come with a final offer for this property. Times are hard, and a woman alone can't hope to make a success here." Ruby stood. "My farm isn't for sale, Mr. Wilkins. I've told you that repeatedly." Wilkins's expression hardened. "Be reasonable. Winter's coming again. You barely survived the last one, and word is your mortgage payment is overdue." Ruby felt the blood drain from her face. How did he know about the mortgage? "The bank's patience won't last forever," Wilkins continued. "I'm offering you an easy way out before foreclosure takes everything." Finley stepped forward. "Mr. Wilkins, Miss Zimmerman has given you her answer." "Stay out of this, Cowboy," one of Wilkins's companions snapped. "This ain't your concern." "I'm making it my concern," Finley replied evenly. Wilkins studied Finley with new interest. "You're that Adams boy from Cottonwood Creek." His mouth curved in a cruel smile. "Still playing hero, I see. Didn't learn your lesson after what happened to the Blackstone family." Finley went rigid. Ruby glanced between them, confused by the sudden tension. "That's ancient history," Finley said quietly. "Is it?" Wilkins looked at Ruby. "Did he tell you about the Blackstones? Family he helped 2 years back? Fire took their barn, their livestock, their lives. Only one who got out was this boy here." "That's a lie." Finley's voice was deadly quiet. "That fire was set by men like you, Wilkins. Men who wanted their land." "Prove it," Wilkins sneered. "Oh, that's right. You can't. Just like you couldn't prove it then. He turned back to Ruby. Think carefully, Miss Zimmerman. Bad luck seems to follow some people. After the men rode away, a heavy silence fell between Ruby and Finley. Is it true? She finally asked. About the fire? Some of it. Finley's face was drawn with old pain. I worked for them. Good people. There was a fire. I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't save them. And Wilkins? I've never been able to prove it. But 3 days before the fire, he made them an offer for their land. They refused. Ruby's mind raced with implications. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you looking at me the way you are right now. Finley's eyes held a bleak resignation, like I'm something broken and dangerous to be near. He picked up his hat. I'll go. Finley, wait. But he was already mounting his horse, his shoulders rigid with shame and old grief. For a week, Ruby waited for Finley's return, but he didn't come. Finally, she rode to Cottonwood Creek, only to learn he'd quit his job and left no forwarding address. The news hit her like a physical blow. She'd pushed away the one person who had stood by her, all because of her fear of connection. Her return to the homestead brought another shock. The small barn was ablaze, flames leaping into the twilight sky. Ruby worked desperately to save what livestock she could, but by morning, the structure was a smoldering ruin. Sheriff Tanner's investigation was perfunctory at best. No evidence of wrongdoing, Miss Zimmerman. Probably a lantern tipped over. It was Wilkins, Ruby insisted. He's trying to force me to sell. That's a serious accusation without proof. The sheriff tipped his hat. My advice. Consider his offer. These accidents, they tend to escalate. Alone again, Ruby faced the bitter truth. The frontier didn't just take loved ones. It actively conspired to break those who couldn't or wouldn't conform. Without the barn, she couldn't house enough livestock to make it through winter. Without Finley's help, repairs would take too long. For the first time, she seriously considered giving up. That night, as she sat on her porch contemplating defeat, a rider approached through the darkness. Ruby reached for her shotgun, then froze as the figure came into view. Finley. He dismounted slowly, keeping his distance. I heard about the fire. Where have you been? The question came out more accusatory than she'd intended. Gathering evidence. He approached the porch steps, but didn't climb them. Ruby, I'm sorry I left the way I did. But I couldn't bear to see you afraid of me. I wasn't afraid of you, she whispered. I was afraid of what happens to people I care about. I know that feeling. His voice was rough with emotion. After the Blackstones, I swore I'd never let myself care that much again. Then I met you. Ruby descended the steps until she stood before him. What evidence were you gathering? Proof against Wilkins. Finley reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a packet of papers. Bank records showing he's been buying up foreclosed properties all over the county. Witness statements about threats he's made. And this. He handed her a letter. From the bank manager in Helena. Wilkins bribed a clerk to tell him about overdue payments so he could pressure vulnerable homesteaders. Will it be enough to stop him? It's enough to take to the territorial judge, and enough to make Wilkins think twice before coming after your land again. Finley hesitated. Ruby, I need to tell you something. The real reason I left. What is it? I want to make an offer on the Henderson place. His eyes held hers. I want to build something here. Something permanent. But more than that, I want. He took a deep breath. I want to court you properly. If you'll allow it. Ruby stared at him, her heart pounding. You want to court me? From the first moment I saw you holding that shotgun. A small smile touched his lips. You looked so fierce and determined. I thought, there's a woman who knows her own mind. Even knowing how dangerous it is to be close to me? Wilkins is just one man. Together, we're stronger than he is. Finley took her hands in his. Ruby, the frontier takes enough from us. Don't let it take this too. In that moment, Ruby faced her deepest fear, that loving someone meant inevitable heartbreak. But looking into Finley's eyes, she recognized a deeper truth, that surviving alone wasn't truly living. Yes, she whispered, and for the first time in years, the word felt like freedom rather than surrender. The territorial judge arrived 2 weeks later. With the evidence Finley had gathered, coupled with statements from other farmers Wilkins had threatened, charges were filed against the land speculator. Though the legal process would be lengthy, the immediate threat to Ruby's farm was neutralized. As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, Finley began building a new barn on Ruby's property, larger and sturdier than the original. Each evening after work at his new ranch, he would ride over to continue construction, often staying late into the night. Their courtship blossomed alongside the barn's rising framework. Ruby found herself laughing again, planning for seasons ahead rather than just surviving day to day. When Finley kissed her for the first time beneath the harvest moon, she didn't pull away in fear, but leaned into the promise of a shared future. Winter arrived with unusual gentleness that year. The new barn stood completed, livestock safely housed within. Ruby's pantry was full, her mortgage current. Most evenings found Finley at her table, the two of them talking late into the night about their hopes for their adjoining properties. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside, Finley knelt before Ruby's fireplace and asked for her hand in marriage. When she accepted, he revealed his wedding gift, the deed to his property, amended to include her name alongside his. "Our land," he said simply. Together. The spring thaw of 1881 brought their wedding day. The ceremony in Helena was small, attended by ranchers and townspeople who had watched their story unfold. As they exchanged vows, Ruby reflected on how completely her understanding of frontier life had changed. "I used to believe the frontier only took," she told Finley that night as they stood on their porch, watching the stars emerge above their combined properties. "That loving someone out here was just setting yourself up for loss." Finley's arm tightened around her waist. "And now I know better." Ruby leaned into his embrace. "The frontier is harsh, yes, but it also gives if you're brave enough to receive. It gave me you." 5 years later, Ruby stood on that same porch, watching Finley teaching their 3-year-old son to ride his first pony in the yard. Their daughter, just beginning to walk, clutched Ruby's skirts as she surveyed the scene with solemn eyes. The Zimmerman Adams ranch had prospered beyond anyone's expectations. The adjoining properties now formed one of the most successful operations in the county. The original homestead had been expanded, a testament to their shared vision and complementary strengths. Chester Wilkins was long gone, having served his sentence and fled the territory in disgrace. In his place, a new community had formed among the neighboring ranches, one based on mutual support rather than competition. As twilight descended, Finley carried their sleepy son up the porch steps. "I think we wore him out," he said, his face alight with the simple joy of fatherhood. "Pa," the boy mumbled drowsily. "Tell the story about when you and Mom met." Ruby smiled. It was their son's favorite bedtime tale, how his father had found a fierce woman with a shotgun who didn't believe in happy endings. Later that night, with both children asleep, Ruby and Finley sat on their porch swing, watching as the first stars appeared over their land. Finley's arm encircled her shoulders, his presence as steady and reassuring as it had been that first winter day when he'd arrived with firewood and quiet determination. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Ruby asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Every day," Finley admitted. "If I hadn't ridden by your farm that day, if you hadn't lowered that shotgun." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But I try not to dwell on it. We found each other. That's what matters." Ruby thought about the frightened, lonely young woman she'd been, convinced that the frontier's only lesson was loss. How wrong she had been. The true lesson of the frontier was that survival alone wasn't enough. It was in connection that one truly thrived. "I love you, Finley Adams," she said simply. His arms tightened around her. "And you'll never be alone again, Ruby Adams. Not as long as I draw breath." As night deepened over the Montana landscape, the lights from their homestead created a beacon of warmth against the vast wilderness. Within those walls, they had created something the harshest winter couldn't freeze and the hottest summer couldn't wither, a love strong enough to withstand the frontier itself.